There's some changes to the Friday lineup that require an early warning as New Zealand kick off, I suppose, the official leg of their tour to South Africa with the first ever international Pro 20 series game. 20 overs apiece makes for explosive action between 7:30 and 10:30. This, of course, means all primetime programming falls away, except for our Friday feature, the classic Stakeouts, going out at 10:30, starring Richard Dreyfuss and Emilio Estevez as detectives hot on the heels of Aidan Quinn's devious convict. Time now to join local investigators hunting a killer who is all too real in solving it.
You are about to witness a true South African crime story. Only the names of witnesses have been changed for their own protection. All reenactments are based on the original police dockets and testimonies by the individuals who were directly involved in the crime or in the solving of the crime. Family held hostage for entire day. 2 women repeatedly raped. Elderly man cruelly beaten. Brutal multiple murders. These headlines would be horrific even if applied to different people and different events. But in this case, they are descriptions of one horrific ordeal suffered by a family in the course of one day. On the 8th of February 2004, the lives of an entire family were to be brutally and cruelly extinguished.
We received a call from the police in Alex informing us that they found 2 vehicles, one a Jetta and a blue Bantam Bakkie. On the Jetta was blood on the door, right inside door, and on the front, the bumper. There was also smears of human excretions on the sides and on the front of the car.
Members of the SABC forensic department were dispatched to the scene in order to do forensic photography of the vehicles, as well as to collect samples of blood and feces, and to examine the vehicles for any other clues as to what may have transpired. The cars were traced to 2 different addresses, both in Benoni. The one vehicle belonged to a private individual and the other was registered to a business.
And it was established that the Jetta belonged to Mrs. Gina van der Merwe, and the Ford Bantam Bakkie belonged to Legion Lock and Cable.
At almost exactly the same time as the cars were found in Alexandra, a man in the Loskop Dam area was on his way to work when he saw a woman's body and a vehicle down the embankment. He called the police. Forensic Specialist Superintendent Anton Crawford was one of the first policemen to arrive at the scene.
I saw the old lady lying in the grass. Her hands were bound with pieces of a tie and a belt. And she had a head wound. There was a lot of blood on her body. And then I walked down to the car, and on the back seat there was an old man. His head, he was bent over forward, and there was a lot of blood beneath his head. It looked like he had been shot through the head. And on the passenger side, on the left front, on the floor between the dash and the seat, there was a young lady. It looks like she was stashed beneath the dashboard. And she also had a head wound I could establish at that time. I told the video man, Inspector Creer, follow me. And I walked down to the vehicle, then I saw there's a bullet hole in the boot. So I told him I'm going to open the boot slowly so that we can determine where that projectile is. And as I opened the boot, I looked down and I saw, but as a 4th guy, we didn't know about it. But I was really shocked, I can promise you that. And this guy was lying in the boot, and his hands and his feet were bound, and he had a bullet mark in his cheek, and there was another one in his chest.
Inspector Ainsley drew a sketch plan of the crime scene, as well as taking extensive photographs.
Die plan word saamgestel omrede op baie foto's kan jy nie al die punte van die toneel kan jy nie op die foto sien nie. So die plan gee oorsig van die hele toneel en waar elke bewysstuk gevind is.
The crime scene was riddled with bullets, projectiles and spent shells. Sergeant Moeng was in charge of the ballistic investigation.
At the scene there was a metallic grey Corsa with 2 bullet holes in it. There were cartridge cases, 2 cartridge cases found inside the vehicle, 5 bullets found inside the vehicle, and 5 cartridge cases were found outside the vehicle.
Sergeant Moeng's investigation involved a crime scene reconstruction, terminal ballistics, and bullet trajectory examination.
One is able to tell where the path of a bullet goes. whether a shot was fired from an alleged firing point, whether you'd be able still to find the direction of the shot. Terminal ballistics is the study of an effect of a bullet on its target or the effect of the target on the bullet itself. At the end of the day, basically it would then help in the scene reconstruction. Looking at the scene, with the 5 cartridge cases found outside the vehicle, one can ascertain that there were shots fired from outside. And looking inside the vehicle, one can also ascertain that shots were fired from within the vehicle.
As there was high-speed blood on the left-hand side of the car, it seemed that the victims could have either been shot at close range near the car, or blood could have splattered when the bodies made impact with the ground. The car found at the murder scene was traced through its registration number. It too belonged to an address in Benoni. The owner was a Mr. Darryl van der Merwe. These two seemingly unrelated crimes were about to be brought together into one horrific sequence of events.
The 9th of February 2004, Sonia van der Merwe contacted her brother Darryl just before 8 or somewhere around there to inquire as to where he was, and he was supposed to fetch her. She could not get hold of him on his cell phone. She tried contacting her parents, could not get hold of them. She drove personally to Legion Lock and Cable, that's the company that they own, and she found the employees standing outside and waiting at the gates, and Darryl did not pitch up.
So I dashed off to my folks' place. I saw Maria, our domestic worker, standing outside waiting to be let in. The front door was closed but not locked. The dogs were inside, the curtains were all drawn, the lights were on, and nothing at that stage looked too amiss. I dropped my bag and I ran through the house. I said to Maria to go and check the one side of the house, and I checked on the other side of my folks' bedroom. That was just a scene of chaos. There was items scattered all over the floor, all over the bedding. My dad's cupboard was open where the safe was, and the safe was open with everything missing.
Sonia then drove her brother's house.
As I was driving there, the phone rang, and one of the people that worked for me at the factory said to me that the police in Alex had just phoned and they had found the bakkie, the work bakkie, covered in blood, and what was going on. I drove past Darryl's house. Everything was fine. I couldn't see anything amiss, so I turned around and I went back to my parents' house, where I then phoned the policeman from Alexander and said, but there's 4 people missing, and the bakkie now, obviously, that he told me I needed some help because I didn't know what was going on. A number of policemen descended on my parents' house. When I was showing some of the policemen through the house in the bedroom, showing them the ransacking and everything, we then got a phone call from the Alexandra police again saying that a gold Jetta had been found. I identified it as my mother's Jetta from the number plate and everything, and that too had blood smears and stains and marks all over it.
It was at that point that the 3 cases were to be conclusively brought together.
Get ready for history in the making right here in South Africa when our boys take on New Zealand in the first ever International Pro 20 match, brought to you by Standard Bank and SABC Sport.
Makaya has been there and done it for EP. And when you know you only have 20 overs to score runs, how many dot balls are you going to let the bowler have? You've seen the local teams at it. Now, catch a Standard Bank Pro 20 international match between South Africa and New Zealand. Friday, 21 October, 7:30 p.m. at the Wanderers in Joburg. For the love of the game! For the love of the game!
There are no half measures here. That's why Standard Bank remains 101% South African.
When you're severely ill or disabled and can't work, make sure you've got green light cover from Old Mutual. It protects your income and pays out exactly what it promises. No excuses.
Contact your Old Mutual personal financial advisor or broker. Old Mutual, simple solutions for success.
I'm a big kid, look what I can do. I can wear big kid pants too.
Huggies Pull-Ups training pants are just like big kid underwear. They go down and up real easy and have built-in indicators that disappear when wet. The perfect tool for potty training in a range of great new Disney designs for girls and boys.
Mommy, wow! I'm a big kid now.
A cell phone had been found lying at the scene of the murders. It suddenly rang.
And I couldn't remember what was the number on it, but then I answered the phone.
I actually got such a fright that I handed it immediately to one of the policemen standing next to me. He took the call, and it turned out that it was a policeman, a superintendent from the Loskop Dam area.
Sonia informed the police that her brother and his wife were also missing. They asked for the address and went there immediately. As they entered Darryl van der Merwe's house, they were faced with a scene of total chaos. The house had been ransacked, and remnants of food, cigarettes, and alcohol bottles were strewn all over. The rooms were in total disarray, with blood and human feces covering areas of the floors, walls, and bedding.
We did find a map, a hand-drawn map, in the house, and Sonia van der Merwe confirmed that the map was an exact replica of her parents' home, and it was done in her brother's and her parents' handwriting.
It was at this time that notification regarding the vehicle that had been found near the Loskop Dam area was received. Sonia van der Merwe confirmed that the vehicle belonged to her sister-in-law, Melissa van der Merwe. Sonia's most dreaded nightmare unfolded as she was told about the 4 bodies found along with the vehicle.
One of the policemen received a phone call. I could see by his demeanor that it was something serious. He then told me that, from the photos I'd given them and all the information, 4 bodies had been found at the Loskop Dam area, and that it looked like it was my entire family.
All that was left to definitively tie these 3 diverse crime scenes together was for the bodies to be identified. That which Ms. van der Merwe dreaded most was confirmed. The bodies found at the Loskop Dam were those of her parents, her brother, and her sister-in-law. The investigation of the houses began in earnest. Items of clothing, liquor bottles, ties, cigarette butts, bedding, and hair samples were bagged and sent for forensic testing. It was also strange that there was feces on the floors and bedding and around the toilet. This was noted in the photographic report compiled.
At the scene of Darryl's house, it seemed the people were tortured, there was blood, there was feces smeared on the walls, on the floor. The bed sheets were soiled.
Concurrently to this, Sergeant Moeng, the ballistics expert who had been at the scene where the bodies were recovered, continued her investigation.
Looking at the appearance of the wound, at times if it's a contact shot, there would be characteristics that you would see on the wound to say that this person was shot at close range. At times you're able to even say whether it's an exit or an entrance wound because of the blackening that you would find around the area.
During the post-mortem, Sergeant Moeng ascertained exactly how the victims had died.
3 of the bodies were still tied up when they were shot at. They all had multiple wounds on them, and 2 of the bodies had each a bullet that was retrieved from their bodies.
The pathology report confirmed what the police had suspected. The women had been raped more than once, and the men beaten repeatedly.
The bodies had been shot at the site where they were found. The bodies, the way they looked, looking at the bullet wounds and looking at the blood around that area, we were able to ascertain that they had been shot at the scene.
Sonia mentioned that the family had all gone out together the previous night, and her brother was helping an employee of theirs, Vincent Kubeka, to sell his car. Darryl had related how Vincent, Tobias Tabu, and another man had been at his house that morning. What seemed like an arbitrary piece of information at the time turned out to deliver the first major breakthrough. The investigation to apprehend the suspects began under Captain Marnie van Zyl.
Firstly, when we asked Sonia, we want to interrogate Vincent, she couldn't believe that he was involved. Inspector van der Westhuizen went to the factory to interrogate Vincent.
He decided to search Vincent. Vincent was found carrying a gold cross with the name Darryl engraved. Sonja van der Merwe positively identified the cross as belonging to her brother. Vincent was taken in for further questioning.
We asked Sonia to draw up a list of the stolen things. Amongst it was TVs, a TV and CDs, 4 handguns and 2 shotguns.
Vincent denied any knowledge of where the guns were or of the murders. He admitted that he had been at the scene of a robbery. He stated that he knew where some of the missing items had been dropped off. Vincent was arrested and he immediately cooperated.
I couldn't believe it. I was shocked, I was stunned, I was horrified. This was a man that I'd known since he was 3 years old. I knew most of his family. His father had worked for my father for 20 years. This was somebody who was second in command in charge to my brother at the factory. He had a responsible position. He was such a part of our family, he was even invited to Darryl and Melissa's wedding.
He admitted that he was involved in the crime, although at first he insisted that he had no idea it was going to happen and that he was merely trying to sell his car to this Tabu, and Darryl had agreed to assist. He said at first that he was coerced into taking part once the crime was underway. He agreed to do a pointing out for the police. Vincent Kobeka told the police that there had been 3 others involved. Vincent spoke briefly of how the horror had unfolded. According to Vincent, he had arranged for a man called Clement Makua to buy his car. They were going to Darryl's house to get the papers. Clement brought his friend Themba Radebe, who was originally introduced as Tabu, and another man called Lucky came along.
And Vincent pressed the button, and Melissa answered, and she said, no, Darryl's not there, and they must wait. And they waited for Darryl to come back. Before they reached the house, they dropped off Lucky at the corner.
Darryl arrived at about 8:30 a.m. He opened the gate with the remote control. He drove in and told us to follow him. Darryl and Temper went next to the garage to talk. Clement and myself waited in the garage. Darryl went into the main house. I saw Clement taking a firearm. He breathed the firearm and told me and Darryl to lie on the floor. Temper took a big screwdriver out of the garage and went into the kitchen to look for Melissa.
Vincent called for Melissa, who replied that she was still getting dressed.
Melissa was sitting on the bed. Temba pointed with his finger across his mouth that we must keep quiet. Temba told her not to scream and he will not kill her.
Vincent stated that Temba then opened the gate for Lucky. They took Darryl and Vincent into Melissa's room, tied them up, and began to ransack.
They asked Darryl for the safe key. They opened the safe and they couldn't find money in the safe. And Vincent and Clement asked Darryl for his bank card and his PIN number, and they went to the bank and draw some money. While we interrogated Vincent, there were big holes in his whole story. How did the other people knew about the safe? And why didn't he escape when they went to the ATM? And for further interrogation, we asked him why didn't he press the panic button? Because he knew Darryl's house.
Temba took Melissa into the other room. He said she must call Darryl's parents and ask them to come to supper. The perpetrator spent the following 5 hours in an orgy of eating, drinking, ransacking, and terrorizing. An unsuspecting Mr. and Mrs. van der Merwe arrived at 6:30.
As they entered the kitchen, Clement was behind them with a firearm and Temba approached them from the front with a firearm.
Vincent's story grew in horror as he gave detailed accounts of how they then went to the parents' house and ransacked it. On their return, the torture of the victims intensified. Temba and Clement allegedly went to the kitchen and prepared 4 cups of coffee laced with rat poison.
The effects of the rat poison on them had caused them to have uncontrollable diarrhea. They had no control over their bowel movements, which explains the excretions, the human excretions in the house, on the carpets, the walls. It seemed as if the 4 people that had the rat poison were scurrying up and down towards the toilet, but couldn't make it to the toilet.
The 2 women were raped repeatedly by the men, and Darryl and his father beaten. Bizarrely, in the midst of these atrocities, one of the perpetrators considerately put out food for the 3 animals in the house.
Still using cooking oil for frying or roasting? The revolutionary Stork Culinesse is a better and more convenient way. Compared to cooking oil, Stork Culinesse spatters less and never leaves nasty, greasy cleanups. Stork Culinesse seals in the moisture for juicier meals with natural color and taste. Whether it's a delicious breakfast or your favorite stir-fry, you'll love the results. You'll find it in the margarine fridge, not for the cooking oils. Stork Culinesse at your supermarket now. Brand power helping you buy better. Scared of your kitchen?
Win one of 3 50,000 Rand kitchen makeovers or one of these fantastic prizes from Stork. All you have to do is buy 1 Stork Culinesse, 1 Stork Tremendous, send in your original till slip with the entry form and kiss your old kitchen goodbye.
Introducing Laser Storm, the world's first 3-in-1 cyclonic cleaning system. Laser Storm transforms from an upright to a portable to a stick vacuum, making it twice as fast, twice as quiet, and twice as light for a fraction of the cost.
Call 444-3344 now for the amazing Laser Storm at today's special TV offer of only $699.95. Also available at these stores and Homemark stores nationwide.
Are you hungry?
Hello.
There are no half measures here.
So, what part do you want?
That's why Standard Bank remains 101% South African.
I've been through different phases in my life. I've changed my look, but I've not changed who I am. And that's what this website is about. It's a monologue between me and those who are not afraid to express themselves. This website's not about ridiculing the monobrow. It's about celebrating it. If the eyes are the window to the soul, this is my balcony.
Who knows what you'll find when you're always online? Surf all you want for only 145 Rand per month. No more scary phone bills. Get MWeb ADSL. Call 08600 32000.
At about 11 that night, Temba apparently decided it was time to move. They loaded all the household goods onto Darryl's bakkie and packed Sonia's family into the Jetta and the Corsa. All the victims, though beaten, ill and bruised, were alive.
Clement drove the Jetta with liking. Temba drove the Corsa. I drove the Bantam. They said they were going somewhere else and I must wait for them at the robot near Whitefield. I fell asleep.
It later transpired that after 17 hours of torture, the 4 victims were driven 160 kilometers to Loskop Dam and shot repeatedly. Their bodies and the Corsa were left at the scene. The bakkie and the Jetta were dumped in Alex. Temba then took them home in his car. It was approximately 4:30 in the morning. At 7:45, Vincent arrived for work at Darryl and Sonia's factory. The investigating team now had to track down the 3 other perpetrators.
Vincent denied we knew where the people lived, the other accomplice lived, but he was willing to show us where the stolen stuff was.
Vincent said it was at a Sangoma's house, who was known to him as Beki. According to the Sangoma, he had no idea that there had been a robbery. He stated that on the 9th, at about 4 a.m., he was woken by Vincent Kubeka, who was driving a bakkie. Beki alleged that Vincent was going to come and stay with him, and he thought this was all his stuff. Beki agreed to help the police. He said that Temba owed him money for some muti he had given him. Beki called Temba and agreed to meet later that day. The police waited. When Temba arrived, he was arrested and searched. With stolen items found on his person and Vincent's statement implicating him, evidence was mounting against him. Temba agreed to testify in front of a magistrate. Just like Vincent, Temba played the innocent to make out that he was an unwitting accomplice. He did, however, complete the harrowing story.
Dorian and I chatted about the boxing. I realized something was wrong. I asked Clement in Zulu, why are they jumping around? He said, we are coming to rob this young man now.
Temba then continued the story by admitting he started to work with the others. He acknowledged that the victims were held hostage and terrorized over a period of about 15 hours.
With interrogation, Temba told us that Vincent was the organizer and he planned everything and he just went along and he was forced to rape with gunpoint the older lady.
Temba then mentioned that the stolen items had been moved from the Sangoma's house to an address in Kingsway. The police drove there. Some of the stolen items were indeed found. Outside in the yard, they discovered 4 guns barely hidden under plastic bags. These guns were those stolen from the victims. They were sent through to ballistics.
Now, the objective was to link these firearms to the cartridge cases and the bullets. To do this, firstly, one starts by firing test shots. After that, you collect the test cartridge cases and test bullets. Then you compare these to the exhibit cartridge cases and exhibit bullets that are handed in. You do that by using the comparison microscope.
The results were an enormous breakthrough in the case. It was ascertained that 2 of the recovered firearms were indeed the murder weapons. The Van der Merwes had been killed with their own firearms. Shortly after their admissions, a contact gave the police a clue as to the whereabouts of the perpetrator known as Lucky. Lucky had a brother who lived in Hilmra, and he said that Lucky stayed with him occasionally. The police waited for him to arrive. When he did, they arrested him. Under pressure, Lucky also made a statement. He said that none of what had happened was his idea, and he was drawn into the plan. He stated that he had driven with Vincent in the bakkie and had not even been present at the murders. The police then turned their attention to Clement. They decided to investigate his cell phone records.
We came across Clement's girlfriend, and he was in contact with the girlfriend. And we applied for a 205, and we picked up some signals in Komatipoort. And then we knew where he was.
Inspectors van der Westhuizen and Lagransie drove up to the area where the signals had been picked up. They spoke to some contact, who mentioned that there was a stranger living in a house in the area. They went there in the middle of the night and found Clement. On March the 1st, Clement Makua, the last of the gang, was arrested. Like all the others, Clement stated that he had no idea what was going down until Temba pulled out a gun. Clement then also admitted to joining in the carnage. He explained how the convoy drove to the area of Loskop Dam. They stopped, moved the victims into one vehicle, and shot them. The report came back from forensics and confirmed much of what the perpetrators had told the police. There was definite proof of semen found not only on the female victims, but also on certain of the bedding and on tissue paper left scattered around. Blood samples were taken from all the perpetrators for DNA testing. It needed to be ascertained whether any of these men had been involved in the rapes. 2 of the perpetrators were implicated. On the 19th of October 2004, the 4 men were sentenced. It was not possible to ascertain who exactly had masterminded this plan, but it was certain that all 4 perpetrators had been present and had taken part in this day of hell. And so all the accused were charged with 4 counts of murder, 4 of attempted murder, kidnapping, theft, and illegal possession of a firearm. Clement and Lucky received the added charges of rape. They were all found guilty on all counts. This sentence brought to closure one of the most gruesome and shocking crimes the investigating team had dealt with. Sonia van der Merwe has only memories and horrific nightmares.
While Vincent was awaiting trial, he called me numerous times. Eventually, I decided to go and visit him in prison to see what he had to say. I thought perhaps that would help me understand. When I saw him, it was very strange for me because I thought I would hate him. I thought I'd want to leap across the counter and rip his head off and do to him what he'd done to my family. But I actually didn't feel anything. I felt indifferent. I sat there and I looked at him and I still saw the little boy that I'd always known. It was awful seeing him, but it was even more awful not feeling anything for him. I didn't feel hatred. I didn't feel anger. I felt absolutely nothing.